You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast alongside Mike Chappell and Matt Adams. I'm Dave Griffiths. So glad to have you along as the NFL offseason is finally here. There is no game to talk about anymore, but boy, there's a whole lot else that we're going to dive into over the coming weeks, over the coming months, before football returns again in late summer, early fall, whatever you have it, whatever your real first foray into real games, quote unquote, I say. With very much quotation marks on them. But for now, so much behind the scenes before we get to that. We'll talk about the Super Bowl, of course, from this past weekend. But I want to begin with the big news for the Colts this week.
Breaking news.
Let's go. Anthony Richardson, 8 weeks post-op, is throwing once again. We saw a picture or a video of him throwing from his agent tweeted out on Twitter. His agent, Derek Jackson, D-E-I-R-I-C, Jackson, posted a 4-second video showing Richardson just throwing a football, bare feet out on the field. Tony Brown would be proud with his bare feet out there. But Chap, I guess Richardson always talked about wanting to push the envelope, but this is pretty much right on time for what the Colts had always told us, what he had told us, what doctors had suspected. 8 weeks post-op, he's back on the field throwing a football.
Yeah, you can't get overly excited, but you do get excited because it's that next box you check off. I remember we talked to him at the end of the season, and he said, man, I'm super excited. He sort of said he's been pushing the envelope, and he said, I hope to be throwing next month, which, here we are. He said, when I do, I'll start lighting it up. Well, he wasn't lighting it up in the video, but it's that next step of throwing the ball, the arm motion, the mechanics, and they're going to take this slow. He doesn't need to be ready until June.
Right.
I mean, you want him ready earlier for most of the offseason work, which opens mid-April. Late April is when you can start actually playing football on the field with players. But until you see the guy doing what he does, you've got a little bit of concern. So this is the next step, and I'm guessing in a couple of weeks we'll see him out there with another video, which is one of the great things about X or Twitter and with agents who like to share is we're going to get sort of a timeline.
Right.
And they're going to show us when he starts zipping it. And it's just kind of cool to see that, again, we've thought that he was ahead of schedule, and this shows that at worst he's on schedule.
Yeah, excuse me, it's a little bit more than 8 weeks. I think it's like a couple months is what the timeline was. So that's my mistake there. Yeah, 24th was when the surgery was. Right. But this was like we said back then, like when we talked to Richardson before Christmas. When he talked about trying to push the envelope, we were all saying, well, like he's still like it would be right after the Super Bowl is when throwing could begin. Right. That was when people were, well, if the Colts make the playoffs, could Anthony Richardson? No.
That's why he had the surgery.
Exactly. Right. So anyway, I just wanted to point out my own mistake there right off the top. But with any luck, Matt, the next video we see from his agent will be Anthony Richardson throwing a pass to the newly signed Michael Pittman Jr. somewhere, that they're back on a field working together once again.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my guys from the digital team here at Fox 59 CBS 4, and we were just kind of talking about Anthony Richardson's recovery, and I'm like, I'm just glad that the first video of him trying to throw a football wasn't him going, oh boy, I'm going to get on my knees here and see if I can throw it 80 yards. Right. No, it's just a nice soft toss. Mm-hmm. Let's take it easy, but hey, 4-second video, season saved, right?
That was a regulation football, wasn't it? It wasn't a Nerf ball.
The Duke, as Andrew Luck would
like
say.
That.
I remember, I can still going back to how we were measuring his advancement by what size of football was he throwing?
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, that's why I think Colts fans are so interested in seeing Anthony Richardson throwing a football, because that is burned into my memory about Andrew Luck's return there in 2018 and taking slowly, like watching him on the field throughout the entire offseason, never throwing a football, just having it in his hand. Oh, is he going to throw it now? And then that like final day of minicamp, I think it was in June, I remember seeing him go out and just like it was nothing, just boop, just throwing it. Everybody's like,
because we had no idea what they were doing behind the scenes.
Right.
It's like when you see guys during the season rehabbing and you don't know where they are and can they come right back. Well, we don't see what they do 5 days a week, maybe 7 days a week with trainers and the really hard stuff. So again, any sign, any video, the proof of life type stuff of a quarterback doing what he does is encouraging.
So yay, Anthony Richardson.
I would have been fine even if it was just him doing the little elastic band arm strengthening exercise just to let us know things are going well. But good, he's tossing a little bit. It's good stuff.
We'll touch on one more thing Colts related before we get to the Super Bowl recap, and that is Rusty Jones has retired after 34 years in the NFL. He spent the last 6 seasons here in Indianapolis with the Colts as the director of sports performance. He's been responsible for conditioning and nutrition. Really a building block chap that gets no attention from us on the regular, but one that's certainly important when it comes to the players being at their best on Sundays.
Yeah, he's involved in, I guess you call it the preventative work of nutrition and conditioning. I remember Joel Erickson mentioned in a story of his that when Anthony Costanza was having issues and they tried to do this, that, and the other, well, Rusty came up and thought it was more of it was like hip issues, and so they worked on that, and then AC was fine. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's those guys that you get the fan base has very little clue about, and these are the guys that when they do their job right, you see that by guys being ready to play. You're going to have injuries because it's a nasty sport.
It's a collision sport,
right? But this is where it helps guys be as prepared as you can for these daily car accidents they're in.
All right. So congratulations to Rusty on a 34-year career in the NFL, and best of luck to him in retirement. The Colts will have to go out and look for someone else, and you can read up online. Follow Chap on Twitter at mchappell51. You can read his work at fox59.com, cbs4indy.com, and I'm sure that we'll have a story or at least a mention of who the Colts hire online there as well. Matt Adams at Statomatty. I'm Dave Griffiths at DaveG_sports. The Super Bowl is in the past. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the 49ers in overtime 25-22. Put on your tinfoil caps, guys, because Taylor Swift, once again, is the champion, and that means all the things that the people on Twitter, that Matt is like rolling his eyes, because those are the people that Matt sometimes deals with, and the people in our fine web team who have to work the Fox 59 Twitter account or and all that. But we don't need to discuss any of that. We'll just brush it under the bed and move along. But I thought that the first half was one of the most boring games of football I had ever seen, and then it got interesting finally there in the fourth quarter. And Patrick Mahomes once again down by 10 in the Super Bowl.
Why do people bet against him?
I don't know.
I really don't. I don't care if he's out there with just a bunch of rum-dums.
Mm-hmm. He's at that point. Like it was what we did here when we were talking about the AFC Championship. I said, I think Baltimore's the better team, but I don't know if I should bet against Patrick Mahomes.
I think Frisco is a better team.
Yeah.
Top to bottom.
But Patrick Mahomes, once again, it was like I saw somebody tweeted this stat out, and I wish I remember who it was, but of the games, of like all the games over the past I think it's even the playoff games over the past X number of years, like a couple decades or so. There's been, 200 chances or something like that in either the fourth quarter or beyond, so fourth quarter and overtime, for a quarterback who was down by 7 to drive, to get the ball, and then you can drive to take the lead with a touchdown. With a touchdown, like you're down whatever and you take the lead. And most quarterbacks, even good quarterbacks, like Tom Brady was something like 40% in his drive. It was like 5 of 11 or something. And Patrick Mahomes, out of all the quarterbacks in this list, was a perfect 7 for 7 in the playoffs when he was down X number of points in the fourth quarter or overtime.
10-point deficits in the playoffs this year, every game?
I know that he's been in a 10-point deficit in every Super Bowl he's played in.
Okay.
But I don't know about every playoff game this year. That's possible too.
Baltimore may not have been. I don't
remember.
But again, it
speaks to his inevitability. He is at that level now that Tom Brady was in. Sorry, Colts fans, to bring up public enemy number 1, but it's the truth. He is at that point where betting against him is foolishness, because you see it time and time again. He finds a way. The Chiefs find a way. They find the right call. They find the right player to hit.
4th and 1, and he keeps it, and
he
scores, and he converts, or the game's over. It's always about put the ball in the hand.
How about that though? Yes. Go ahead. Continue.
Put the ball in the hands of your best player.
Yep.
And if it doesn't work, well, okay. But he had our game. I go back and I'll harp on it. The 4th and 2 against Houston. Mm-hmm. The Colts really didn't have the best guy to have the ball in the hands of with Minshew and then throwing to Goodson.
Yes.
But this is where you say, this is our guy, and that's what great teams and great quarterbacks do.
That play was the perfect example of keeping your best player, like giving the ball to your best player. And it's such a contrast to what the Colts did, having Jonathan Taylor on the sidelines. A average fan might look at that play and they might call it an RPO. That was not an RPO. That was just a play action fake. There was no run option there.
He was keeping that from the snap.
And it's obvious because of the way Pacheco takes off. And I believe it was Pacheco there in the backfield with him. Because he barely put his hands up to look for the ball. He just started sprinting to that sideline. There was no action from him that was going to take that ball. Mahomes was going to have that ball, period. And that's what you do. You put it in your best player's hands. And who's your other best player? Travis Kelce, your other first ballot Hall of Famer there. He slides out just on a quick run to the sideline, and the linebacker goes with him. And so that was your option right there. Either hit Kelce if the linebacker stays on Mahomes, or take it yourself if you're Mahomes. And you put the decision in his hands because he's your best player, and Kelce's your other best player. Pacheco was never an option. Those were the two right there that it was going to be. And he ran for, 6 yards or whatever. And he could have probably pushed it longer. Fortunately, he didn't. He went down. He slid. By the way, I tweeted this out separately. Matt's already laughing. But the streakers, or the half-streakers who came onto the field who were sliding, Anthony Richardson could learn maybe a thing or two about sliding from those guys, or from Patrick Mahomes on that final 4th and 1 drive. But I needed to get that off my chest. That was a perfect example of having your best players on the field, having a call for your best players to put it in their hands. I know Shane Steichen had a good call. It's evident because Goodson was open. It's the play was there. It worked. But there's something to be said about having the call right and also having your best players in the position to make the plays, not the guy, well, we trust everyone on the roster. Good for you. You trust everyone on the roster.
We practice that all week.
Good for you. Have your best player out there ready to make the play when the season's on the line.
And that's why, and we'll mention it, we've mentioned in the past and going forward, that's what an Anthony Richardson does for you. He gives you, he's not even remotely in the same neighborhood as Mahomes. But what he can do on the edge of the stress, remember what Chris Ballard told us? He said defenses play you differently. And when that quarterback who has that ability to stress a defense, what he can do, that's what, it's the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks, the Allens and the Jacksons and the Mahomes, it just gives you that. And more times than not, that quarterback, he only had to get a yard. And let's say that the defense played that perfectly against Richardson. He's big enough, he just may lower the shoulder and get the yard. Where Mahomes, he wasn't touched until he slid for the most part. But that's why it's really, again, I go back to anyone who bets against Mahomes. When the Niners kicked the field goal, I thought the game was over. I just figured Mahomes, because what people, and we can get into the overtime decision and all that, but once on the second possession, you're facing the most clutch quarterback in the game today, and he gets 4 downs. Everything is a 4-down series. So it's just it was amazing, and anyone who was surprised by Mahomes just hasn't been paying attention.
Yeah. Once the 49ers, I think it was a 3rd and 4 that they had to convert before they kicked the field goal. Once that play just got blown up and didn't go anywhere, I'm like, I think this game's over. Because there is no chance to me, like you said, with Mahomes, they're going to go for it on 4th down every time. There is no way they're not going to be able to pick up those 4th downs and get down the field and get into scoring position. No way.
And at the end of regulation, when San Francisco was ahead and Chiefs got the ball to make the drive for the tying field goal, they had ages on the clock. I forget what, but it was probably it was less than 2 minutes, I'm pretty sure. But when Mahomes has 12 seconds and beats the Buffalo Bills a couple years ago, there is no time limit that is too small for him. It's ludicrous what we now expect of him, but he always delivers.
It's because he's done it, and he keeps doing it. And he did it again here on the biggest stage.
So it's the 3rd Super Bowl championship for the Kansas City Chiefs in the last 5 years. That is where you get 3, Chap, in that time frame. That puts you in the dynasty.
Puts you in the Patriots, the Cowboys back.
Right.
Pittsburgh win 4 and 5 or 4 and 6 because they went back to back twice.
Yes, and then sorry, go ahead.
Right.
49ers in the 80s.
That's and I guess I thought someone had won 3 in a row. I thought maybe Dallas did, but no, I mean, so
there was
this
a gap.
and it is just the whole system is built to where this doesn't happen. Salary caps and players moving and injuries, it's not supposed to happen. But when you got the special player, he makes all things possible.
Special coach there, too. Andy Reid has had a complete resurgence in Kansas City, obviously, from his time in Philadelphia. That, of course, I remember growing up in Philly as an
Remember
Eagles
all
fan.
the criticism Andy got?
It was very much justified at the time.
I understand.
But let me say.
All he did was get him to 4 or 5.
4 straight NFC championships, and then got them to the Super Bowl.
Couldn't get over the hump.
Exactly.
Right.
But it was after that. Like that wasn't the problem, that you can't get over the hump. Like, there were problems after that I don't need to get into, because like this is not a Philadelphia Eagles mid-2000s podcast, but which
there was so much
I think I could anchor pretty well.
There's so much criticism now on the Niners that and Shanahan. Well, he can't win the big game. Well, he won a lot of big games to get to the biggest game. And did I see right that Andy Reid won his first Super Bowl in his 21st season?
I think that might be correct, because he had a bunch in Philly and just never won the Super Bowl. And then a couple in Kansas City before he got there, yeah.
I believe Andy was on the sidelines when the Chiefs led the Colts 38-10 in the playoffs.
Yep.
And that special quarterback did things you're not supposed to do.
Right.
So it's like with Shanahan choosing to take the ball, it was the wrong decision because it didn't work out.
Right.
And I thought the one flaw in his reasoning, well, we wanted to get the ball third. You weren't guaranteed to get the ball third. Would Andy Reid have, had it been touchdown to touchdown, would he have gone for 2?
It's a good question.
Because if you don't go for 2 to win it,
then a field goal
beats you.
Right.
And field goals were they 350-yarders?
Yes.
They kept breaking their Super Bowl record.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's but whenever it doesn't work, when 4th and 2 doesn't work with the Colts, do something else. And when taking the ball to start overtime doesn't work, do the other thing. So, but it was an amazing game, and I did see that Taylor Swift was shown 11 times.
Mm-hmm. It was for only 54 seconds.
Out of 4 hours.
Exactly.
I thought it was so crazy, over the top crazy, how people got
bent out of shape,
and she's a distraction and bull. I mean, yes, it was annoying, but come on, it was, I don't tune in for announcers. I don't not tune in because of the announcers. People don't go to the game hoping that they can catch a glimpse of Taylor Swift in a suite that they'll never get near. Mm-hmm. It was just crazy.
This is a complete tangent, but Jim Nantz and...
That's what we specialize in, is tangents.
Yeah. Jim Nantz and Tony Romo, I read a lot of think pieces after the Super Bowl, just railing against those guys as the worst announcers on the face of the planet, and I don't know.
The thing that I was upset about, irritated about, is I didn't know what would have happened logistically if Kansas City doesn't score on that pass and it and it hits triple zeros.
Yes, they did not do a good job of explaining some of the more expansive parts of the overtime
apparently,
rules.
And again, I've not looked into it because it's not been a factor. But it's as the ref said, we're playing a second game.
Right.
So the first overtime was a quarter, and it just would have gone into the second quarter.
Right.
But they never told you that. And I thought the fact that some Niners said they didn't understand the rules or whatever, so what? As long as the coaches knew. I mean, it's a bad look, I guess, that your players didn't know what was going on. Was it McNabb said he didn't know games?
Didn't know games could end in a tie. It was Donovan McNabb, yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was just tell me what the rules are because we're down 2 minutes, a minute, a half a minute. What happens if the time runs out?
Yeah, and you didn't see the urgency from the Chiefs, like
because they knew
downing the ball, right. And you're like, because you're thinking like, but if the clock runs out, is this over?
Do we have another coin flip?
Right.
So that's what they had. They just never cleared that up, I don't think. Mm-hmm. So, but that's just
yeah. My only gripe, I'll say my one gripe about it. Like, I really like Tony Romo. I find him to be educational. I find him to be having fun. I'm a fan of people having fun. That's why I'm a fan of Taylor Swift going to these games. She's a girl who has a boy, and she's watching him, and they're enjoying
and
themselves.
And she's young, got money. God love you.
Let them have some fun. It's cool.
Right.
And I have no problem with it. And that's like Tony Romo has fun when he broadcasts football games. It very much comes across in the way he does it. But I thought the winning call, he just talked too much. I think he should have let it breathe a little bit. That's maybe just me as a broadcaster myself a little bit, just kind of with a little the semantics.
Let the crowd noise take over.
Exactly.
Let the players hug each other.
Sometimes that's the best. Yeah. The best commentary is you just shut up.
Right. But so that's my only gripe. But I would not bring my criticism of him too much further than that. I thought he's great. Nance is solid as always. There are a lot of really good broadcasters in football, and those guys are one of them. That team is undeniable.
I just wondered what you guys thought, because I had seen a couple of big national publications talk about how Tony Romo and Jim Nance ruined the Super Bowl and
get out.
I was like, I don't know that they ruined it. Now, they could have done some things better. I think anybody could acknowledge that, which Dave talked about.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Super Bowl 58. Super Bowl 59 will be in Louisiana at New Orleans next year.
They know how to put on a Super Bowl.
They do.
Because it's New Orleans.
Exactly. And I believe Mardi Gras is the same week down there. So I'm sure there won't be too many people. It won't be very packed at all.
No, not at all. Nobody will go to that one.
I've covered a Super Bowl in New Orleans. And when you get your work done at the end of the week, it's a long week. And then you go down to Bourbon Street on Saturday night before the Super Bowl. And it's got to be like Times Square on New Year's Eve. And maybe I've mentioned before, you go wherever the crowd goes.
Yep.
You're sort of body surfing horizontally, and it's unbelievable. But they'll do. Indy did it better, but Indy doesn't have
Bourbon Street
and all that stuff. So I don't think Indy will ever get it again. But they're talking now about Vegas being in that rotation.
Yeah, it sounds like it got high marks from a lot of people,
which is incredible.
It has to be.
To where they've come from about Tony Romo wasn't allowed to be was it a card show at a casino?
Like a fantasy football thing, I thought it was.
Because it was in a casino.
Yeah.
And
that was 10 years ago.
In New Orleans, the Superdome is, I believe it's Caesars Superdome. So
yes,
we're in gambling forever, but so that's just another tangent.
All right. Well, let's divert our attention back to the Indianapolis Colts and our off-season coverage of the team. We're exploring the tight ends, offensive line, and secondary today here on the Colts Blue Zone podcast for the next 40 minutes or so. And I believe it would make sense to begin talking about tight ends, since we've spoken a little bit about Travis Kelce already and his impact on this game and on that fourth down play in particular. But you look right across the field, and you see the all-pro first-team tight end who played for the San Francisco 49ers, George Kittle, who did not have a very good game. They didn't find ways to get him involved for whatever reason, whether that's the Chiefs, which probably is in part, or San Francisco trying to do other things. But you look at the top tight ends from the NFL this year in terms of their performance: George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta. David Njoku. For the top 6 tight ends, those teams all made the playoffs, which should not be surprising. It's an important position, and these guys were very productive. The other two, Evan Ingram of Jacksonville, Matt, we were talking before, saying probably should have been in the playoffs.
Yeah, I actually had it in the show notes. I changed it right before the show. 5 of the 6 made the playoffs, because in my mind, the Jacksonville Jaguars were in the playoffs, but they weren't.
Nope. Now, T.J. Hawkinson, the other one, in terms of his production this year.
And they were in the race there until the very end there, but they had some tough luck in Minnesota, of course.
Most of these guys, 90-plus catches or so and 900-plus yards. That's kind of the range of these top guys. George Kittle actually only had 65 catches this entire year, but had more than 1,000 yards. He was the only tight end here to eclipse 1,000 yards, it looks like. Yes, excuse me. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, Kittle was the only one to eclipse 1,000 yards. Sorry, I was reading as I was talking, and sometimes that's not the best.
Not always the best policy.
Exactly. But all that to say, this is an important position. And the best teams And you can throw Baltimore in that mix with Mark Andrews. Exactly. He just got hurt, and that's why he's not listed in this top group. This is an important position. You look at other teams in the NFC. The Eagles have Dallas Goedert, who is really important to their success. The Houston Texans signed Dalton Schultz this past offseason, who is important to their success. Not at the same level as these other guys, but having a productive, reliable, and in some ways explosive tight end, it seems to be a differentiating factor from the best teams in the league. They all have that option. It doesn't mean that other teams that aren't good teams don't have good tight ends too, but all these teams that are good teams, Chap, have this option to have a dynamic playmaker at the tight end position.
And I think that, and Matt's got on our list here, I think that's going to be a target of the Colts. You need to have that guy. And the Colts have tried to find that guy through mid-round draft picks. With go back to 2012, and they weren't mid-rounds. It was Fleener and
Dwayne Allen.
Second-round picks.
Second-round picks. And for a short time, they were pretty good. And then they latched on to Jack Doyle, who wasn't a draft pick, and he had a heck of a career. So you just need that guy, and if you got people outside, Chris Ballard talks about being more explosive. That can be either with the tight end himself or what that tight end does to draw coverage, and it opens up for other people. So I think we're going to see their best tight end next season is not here yet. I think whether it's in the draft, whether it's in free agency, I would probably rather in the draft. Eric Ebron comes along once every. It's funny how we've joked. We went through the Eric Ebron era.
We did. It was an era,
and it was short.
Yes.
But he's such a that guy is such a matchup nightmare. Mm-hmm. Size and speed, and anymore, whatever people used to think tight ends are, that's not what they are. They're almost big receivers. They're 6'3", 6'4", 240, 250-pound receivers. If you get that guy, he can do so much to your offense.
They are freaks, and that's the proverbial term. And we know that Chris Ballard loves freaks, and we've seen some of those guys drafted, like you mentioned, trying to take a stab on some guys in the middle rounds, like a Jelani Woods recently.
Drew
Ogletree recently. And about Woods specifically, I mean, he went into college as a quarterback, and then he became a tight end afterwards. So he's like they're taking these guys that are freaks, but they are developmental guys at the same time.
Mo Ali Cox, I mean, as a free agent.
Yes.
But when you get those guys as so-called developmental guys, the problem a lot of times is the ceiling is a lot lower than what you had hoped it would be.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with Mo Ali Cox.
No.
At all.
He's a professional he's an NFL player. 100%. He's going to get another contract.
And he will probably he'll get another contract
somewhere
from somebody. Not here.
Probably not.
I don't think. And he probably won't be back next year. Mm-hmm. I think they can save, I don't know what it is, $3 million by cutting him. But he's had a great career for a guy who was a power forward. But it's just when you do that, the mid-round, late-round picks or undrafted guys, too often there's a ceiling that you hope they wouldn't reach.
Mm-hmm. What was Eric Swope from a few years ago that they drafted?
I still like Eric Swope.
Yeah.
Injuries really doomed him.
Because that guy had just the total package, and you did see a high ceiling for him.
Wasn't a very good blocker, and I didn't care.
No, it didn't matter because that guy could make plays. But unfortunately, like you said, injuries slowed down his career, and then just never really was never able to turn into that solid everyday player.
I think they were hoping that Kylan Granson could become like Eric Swope. And as much as I like Kylan Granson, the person, wonderful guy to interview. He's a cheery dude. I loved his his photo shoot after his first touchdown this year with his baby.
The new arrival in his family.
Exactly. I just don't know if you can't count on him to take his production from 30 catches, 368 yards, and a touchdown to be one of these game-changing tight ends. You can't just plan out a season like, oh, yeah, I think Kylan's going to make that jump to double all of his production and multiply his touchdowns by 6. And then there you go, where our tight end quandary is answered. Look at these guys. Will Mallory, a rookie who I liked Will Mallory. but he only had 18 catches.
Do you see 60 catches a year from him?
I don't know about that.
Don't.
Yeah, no, not right now for sure. Mo Alley-Cox. Mo is what he is, like we kind of talked about already. You're not going to get anything more from him. You're not going to get anything less from him, though, either. He's a very good blocking tight end who can also make some catches here and there from time to time. Drew Ogletree, he's suspended. He's on the commissioner's exempt list right now. So I'm counting on nothing from Drew Ogletree.
I don't expect that he'll be back. We'll see, but we'll see how that all gets adjudicated.
Right. And so you combine all those guys, and they had 70 catches for 883 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's basically one of these top tight ends. Like if you combine all of them together, you need one guy to do all this, and then you need other guys to be kind of just ancillary guys that are from time to time popping up there in your order. And obviously, I think Jelani Woods is the ultimate wild card in this scenario. The Colts drafted him because they really like him, and they drafted him. I believe he was a third-round pick.
Yeah, I believe so.
A couple years ago. And I still believe that his arm is intriguing. That could be a really interesting thing for unique plays like we saw from the 49ers with Juwan Johnson throwing a touchdown to Christian McCaffrey. The fifth-ranked, by the way, quarterback in that class back in like 2017,
that's
whenever
wild,
it was. Yeah, he was. And he went to Tennessee. He was a quarterback recruit. He was behind guys such as Jarrett Stidham, I think, was in that class. So I think it was before. I think it might have been like 2015. I think it was a good while ago. But some guys in that class. So he was one of them. But anyway, all that to say, I think that could be a really interesting way to use some of his talent because it is absolutely a talent of his. But after a completely lost season last year, Chap, again, you can't rely on him to be like, oh, our tight end room is okay. We've got Jelani Woods coming back. We've got Kylan Granson taking another step and Will Mallory too. Like you can't just sit on this group and anticipate greatness out of them.
Because you're going to build from within.
Right.
Right.
Like you like building from within, and that's cool. You like developing guys. And there's something to be said, like a couple years ago when Chris Ballard let guys like Danico Autry and Justin Houston go because they wanted to develop their defensive ends. Like that's one strategy to go with. But in this scenario with the tight ends, it doesn't seem like that is the proper way to move forward because you haven't seen maybe the same potential on the field with this group that we had seen with the defensive ends to kind of compare to those two positions. Yeah.
Sometimes the collective productivity is fine. You wanted more, even from a collection, you wanted more than that. But the last time they've had a tight end with over 400 yards himself was 2019. With Jack Doyle. And you just want that guy. I'm not saying Dallas Clark that in 2009 he had 100 catches for 1,100 yards, or Ebron in 2018 he had 13 touchdowns. I mean, he was a force.
Didn't he have a rushing touchdown too?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, and he reminded us. He reminded us of that.
What, he reminded us? I don't
remember. Yeah,
really.
But they've had they've had Doyle was a 2-time Pro Bowler, and Ebron. You need a guy who at some point during the week the opposing coordinator says, yeah, and we gotta watch this guy down the seam or whatever, and if we're not careful, he'll do. And they don't have that. And to think that you saw enough from Mallory, no, you didn't. I mean, he's a complimentary tight end. The issue is going to be is Jelani Woods, if and when you move on from Mo, can he be that blocking guy? I want that. I want my tight end to be receiver, to be that guy that can just take the top off of a game. And the one thing that I think's missed about Kelsey and like Kittle, they're pretty good. They're complete tight ends.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll knock you on your butt. But you see these guys in all these games, and you're looking at guys making plays, and it's 84, it's 86, it's 87. It's a tight end doing things. And the Colts need that because the injuries and the suspension. Last year, you didn't even know who was going to be active. Everybody was in and out of the lineup. They need to find that guy. Do they do it in the draft? Will Bowers be there at 15? I don't know. Would Ballard move up for a tight end? I don't know.
Depends on the cost, as always.
And then you've got Shane Steichen. And again, I still say that, yes, the defense needs to be better. So much this year and even next year has to be about strengthening the supporting cast of the quarterback. It just does. Yes, re-signed Michael Pittman or franchise, whatever. But then still add another receiver. I want a veteran receiver. I don't want another young guy. They've got young guys, and then tight end. And it looks like there's some decent tight ends in the draft. Bowers is. It's funny how as the draft nears, we're about 2 months off.
Mm-hmm. Right about now.
How all the analysts will be cutting down the quarterbacks. We're gonna be thinking these quarterbacks are awful, yet they're going to be building up the tight ends and the corners and the tackles. And by the time the draft gets here, Bowers is going to be a top 5 pick. And I've seen some mock drafts he goes 5 to the Chargers.
Yep.
Which you just don't. The last tight end taken, was it Pitts? Was he?
Kyle Pitts was 8th, I believe, 7th or 8th, wasn't he?
But again, these guys, they took a guard 6th, which you just simply don't do. But if you think that guy, remember in Philly, didn't Steichen have Goddard? Mm-hmm. I don't know if he had Ertz. Ertz might have been gone.
I think he might have had him for 1 year when he was there.
But it's just when you got a guy as creative, I thought, as we've talked about, that Steichen did some great things. 10th in scoring with these guys. Mm-hmm.
Still boggles my mind.
It does.
Every time.
And just increase the talent level that he's got to work with, and everything is going to be at his disposal to where he can do things regularly, not having to scheme so much. Yes, he's going to scheme. Sometimes players just make plays. Mahomes, you just make plays. Mm-hmm. And give him another receiver and give him a tight end that can really do damage.
Yeah, guys that can look back on the quarterback and see when he's breaking out of the pocket, like Richardson's probably going to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Put your hand up.
Exactly. Yep. Can get away from the linebacker and kind of do the scramble drill. And that's what Kelsey and Mahomes seem to be so good at. But that's something that comes with time as well. Like you look at a guy that whoever if they draft a guy, if it's a Bowers, let's just say, that's something I think that really does develop over time, is when you see the quarterback breaking free, like where does he want you? Where should you go? And for the guys that are intermediate guys like a Josh Downs as a wide receiver and a tight end, any tight end, you would imagine that's a strength that you would want. That's a skill that you would want from whoever comes in from that position. So other players that are on the Colts roster right now as tight ends include Jordan Murray, who is signed to the practice squad in September. Eric Tomlinson signed to the practice squad on January 2nd, and there you go. So there's the tight end group, period. Early mock drafts definitely have Bowers there as someone the Colts could be looking at if he falls that far. But your best hope if you're the Colts is that people fall in love with the quarterbacks, obviously.
I've seen one draft where like 5 quarterbacks went top 8.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Knock yourself out.
That is the best case scenario if you're an Indianapolis
All
Colts
you
fan.
see are talent. Is talent slipping down to you, whether it's a tight end, whether it's a corner,
or anybody.
Right.
Yeah. That's what happened with Malik Hooker when he came to the Colts in 2015. He was a top 10 pick, and he was hurt. So that's why he was a top 10 talent, I should say. And he's still in the NFL now. He was with the Dallas Cowboys. At least he has been. And he developed, he carved out a role for himself there. But he was a talent that slipped because of his injuries in particular that year. But this year, talent might slip because of quarterbacks. One team falls in love with Michael Penix Jr. Boom, best case scenario. One team falls in love with J.J. McCarthy. Let's go. One team falls in love with Bo Nix.
I just didn't. When I saw McCarthy play,
I didn't see
top 10 quarterback.
No, neither did I.
I just didn't.
Like, he didn't do anything that was all that dynamic. But again, like one team falls in love with him. That's all you need.
That's all it needs.
Go ahead.
What's a team? What's a player's value on the open market? It's whatever one team is willing to pay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We've seen that in the past from getting players and from shipping them away.
And if they do have a big run on quarterbacks, then I do see the better possibility that maybe Ballard does trade up a little bit, because if he only has to move up a few slots, then maybe he will.
But at the same time, he's getting more people pushed down to him.
That's true.
So
he might have better value there to take from there.
It would be hard for me to see, unless he just thinks that
if he
Bowers
loves the guy.
is that next guy giving up to whatever it would take to move up 4 or 5 spots. I don't know.
Because honestly, as I've joked many times in the podcast when we talked about the draft, I totally expect the Colts to just trade down and pick up a couple extra second-round picks because that is what we have seen over the years.
And if more quarterbacks are taken and more players are pushed down, then the thought is, well, we can slide back 4 or 5
we'll get better
spots.
value if we do that.
But that's why they're in a good position. But again, the bottom line, whatever they want to do, the more quarterbacks that go, the better. It just is.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift to the offensive line, where I don't think we need to spend too much time because the starting 5 should be pretty obvious from what we have. Bernhard Raimann at left tackle, Quentin Nelson left guard, Ryan Kelly at center, Will Fries right guard, Braden Smith right tackle. Those are your starters. Those are pretty much etched in stone. They're all under contract to come back next season. And Ryan Kelly says that he is coming back, which was a point of contention, perhaps.
It seemed to confuse Mr. Kelly himself.
Kelly, indeed. He was like, what are you guys talking about?
Who said that? Well, it's out, it's out there.
It's out there. You need to check your sources. Well, those sources were legitimate sources.
Right.
There were people with some knowledge of something, but apparently Ryan Kelly still has some interest.
And at some point, though, they need to be considering Plan B at center.
Yes.
Because what's he play, 8 or 9 years? And at some point, enough's going to be enough. Mm-hmm. So, but they're not in that position for the first time in a while to where you don't have – I saw one mock draft had the Colts taking an offensive tackle. Was it the Penn State guy?
There are some really good tackles in this draft.
I know.
So that's I understand why they have the Colts taking it in that sense. But again, the only way I can imagine the Colts taking a tackle in this draft is if they move Braden Smith to guard, because he was a guard coming out of college, and I know they made him a tackle, and it was Gooch who said this guy's a tackle. It was Chris Ballard who thought he was a guard, but Coach Googe, Dave DeGuglielmo, said no, he's a tackle, and he's turned into a great tackle. And I think he was the Colts' best offensive lineman this year when he was in there and when he was healthy. I don't think they will do do
you don't want to pay a guard $17 million,
exactly,
but you're going to be paying your tackle on a rookie
Not as
contract.
Much. Exactly. So the Colts would definitely have the 2 most expensive guards of all time with Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith if they do this. It would not be
strung up the middle.
Exactly.
About $40 million.
Yeah, it would not be the way that you typically want to build a football team. But that's if they really love one of these guards.
It sounds like the perfect roster construction for the Colts.
I know, it does. It sounds like something Chris Ballard would do. That's the thing. That's why I'm laughing at it. That's why I bring it up. Because there are a lot of good offensive tackles in this draft, which we can talk about all of them later.
To get.
And they are.
They
are
hard
to get. They're really hard.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if Braden Smith would be happy to move inside to guard because, again, you'd rather have the tackle money when you're working on your future contracts.
But he's got the tackle money.
So
he has it now, but that next contract
may not on the next contract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
but they're in. Let's say nothing changes with this personnel group. They're in pretty good shape.
They are. I really think they are. And you have a lot more confidence now in Bernhard Raimann than you had at the start of the year. He seems like a legitimate left tackle in the NFL.
I think he had one bad game. Was it the Saints? No, it was Cincy.
Cincinnati.
Everybody
has one bad
Everybody
game.
had a bad game.
Yes.
But again, I thought, and we've talked about, I think one of the biggest things to come out of the season was you can say, okay, he's our left tackle. Mm-hmm. And we'll worry about paying him left tackle money in next year.
Yeah. Exactly, because next year, this will be his third year coming up.
So we do for an extension.
Yes, exactly. He'll do for an extension next year. And that's
I guess it'll go to show if we think that the Bernhard's the guy, if the Colts think he's the guy, that may be a little bit of a tip off in the draft.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yep. So that's your starting 5. Beyond that, Blake Freeland had a rookie year where I thought he was very respectable because he was definitely thrown into the fire a couple times.
Myles Garrett,
exactly.
Aaron Donald.
They did to him what they did to Bernie last year.
Yeah, if there's something beyond throwing into the fire, maybe throwing him into a volcano. That's what they did. Yeah, with Blake Freeland going up against Myles Garrett. But in spite of that, you still you look at rookie year and you're like, okay, you performed better than expected. But now in year 2, if he ever comes back in, you want him to be better. You obviously want him to take the next step. You want him to develop. So seeing his first year was encouraging in terms of his baseline play. And he was one of the most athletic tackles in last year's draft, as was Jake Witt, the other guy they drafted who ended up on injured reserve.
Yeah, that was a preseason, wasn't it?
It was, yes. It was a training camp injury, I'm pretty sure, because I don't even think we ever saw him in a preseason game.
Nope. I think it happened in early August or something along those lines.
7th round pick out of a small school. And if we all remember, if you fire your engines up in the rewind, going back to one of our podcasts that we did pre-draft, I had him in my mock draft for the Colts. Colts just because I looked and I saw who the most athletic tackles were, and he was one of them. And knowing Chris Ballard, I had him as a 7th-round pick again, and that's where they
loves his metrics.
Darn right he does. So, and we'll talk about that, of course, in the coming weeks before this year's NFL draft. Wesley French filled in at center when Ryan Kelly was out, did pretty well. So maybe he's a guy that you consider at center in the future if Ryan Kelly indeed decides to step away eventually. Jack Anderson, another center. Arlington Hambright, Lewis Kidd, Danny Pinter, Josh Sills, all at guard. Pinter,
I think Danny Pinter would be your
center of the future.
Center
he was really good
future.
Center in 2021.
They were like 3-0 or 4-0 with him.
Mm-hmm. Good at center, not quite as strong guard.
Yeah. Right, and he had was it a broken ankle, broken foot? Early.
Yes, it was something, either a foot or an Achilles
preseason or whatever. Wasn't Achilles. I think it was a broken foot. Broken ankle. So, yeah, and the one thing I remember what struck me about Blake Freeland is at some point it was mentioned, well, he needs to get stronger, which were similar things that people said about Ryman as a rookie. Remember when we talked to Bernie in OTAs, he told us he put on like 15 or 20 pounds.
Right.
And that's what you do when you get into the NFL and you've got people who focus on that.
You got nutrition guys that have just retired. You need another good one.
You walk past Blake Freeland in the locker room, and he's a big man among big men.
Yep.
So if you put some, 10, 15 pounds on him and add muscle, I think the most important thing about Blake Freeland is he was still standing at the end of the season, because he could have really the deer in headlights, and he didn't. He had his troubles and all that, but he's only going to get better. As again, I compare it to Ryman as a rookie.
Yeah,
he was rough, and you had no idea coming out of his first year what he was going to be. And so, if they can get even 50% of that development from year 1 to year 2 from Freeland, they've got it at worst a solid swing tackle.
The Colts had the third best offensive line in the NFL per Pro Football Focus this year, and that is a far cry from their 18th position at the end of the 2022
season. Which
honestly
seems generous, but they did have a good...
18th or the 3rd?
Right. Well, a little bit both, probably.
Way. But, I mean, that line was so bad last year, although I do know that after Saturday came, that line did play a little bit better toward the end of the year, but that first part of the season was so
bad.
They
played well until they let Nick Foles, writhe on the ground against the Giants.
Yeah.
But that's what we digress.
Right. So the Colts allowed 41 sacks this past year in 2023. They allowed 60 back there in 2022.
I was surprised it was 41. I'd forgotten that they'd given up that many sacks.
Yeah. Well, there were some games where there were some it was more they came in bunches. Right. I think it wasn't just consistently.
Yeah. It wasn't. It didn't feel like it was a line that consistently gave up a lot of pressure all the time. But then there were some. There were some moments here and there.
I wonder how many of those, when the coaches look at it, was on the quarterback.
Yeah.
Was on Minshew from
maybe not getting rid of the ball,
running into pressure or whatever.
Because we had a few of those. I'm going to be in the pocket, and then I'm going to run right into the other team. Right. So that happened a few times.
For the rest of our talk here today on the Colts Blue Zone podcast, we'll focus on the secondary. 16 players currently on the roster right now. There's a lot of young talent, no doubt about it. So I think this is one of the more intriguing aspects of the Colts offseason is what they do in the secondary, Chap, because there are some ways I think you can easily argue to what I brought up earlier about the defensive line a couple years ago. Like you don't want to bring in veterans that will stunt the growth.
Take reps away from the young guys.
Of the young guys, exactly. But you saw at times last year what having young guys meant to your secondary. The Colts last year was 17th in yards allowed per game. They were 21st in yards per completion, allowing 10.4 yards per catch. And those were both pretty dramatic drops from 2022 in the secondary. So they were 17th in yards allowed per game last year. They were all the way up in 11th in 2022.
Stephon Gilmore.
Exactly. They were 21st in yards
difference.
per completion last year. They were 10th in yards per completion 2 years ago. You're right. Stephon Gilmore, huge boost to that secondary. maybe Dallas Flowers helps in that aspect, but again, he was an undrafted rookie 2 years ago, so you can't say like, oh, this guy was just injured, we hope to slot him back in because we thought he was going to be one of our starters, and so he can be that again. You can't just say, hey, Juju Brents, he was a second-round pick. We have high hopes for this guy. We want him to be a starter in the long term, so let's just lock him in there and not do anything for competition. I think that's what you have to do, if you ask me right now, as you look at the list of cornerbacks, whether it's Dallas Flowers, Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, Darrell Baker Jr., kind of your top 4 outside corners right now. Are you completely comfortable going into the season with that group? Do you want to bring in a veteran presence, a veteran guy who's been around for a while to be able to challenge those young guys and maybe be your second starter alongside one of them, maybe be your first starter if you really want to provide someone as like a bullseye to hit, even rather than a fellow competitor to push alongside. I really do think this is a position where Chris Ballard could go either way. I think that I have an opinion which one I would rather have him do, but at the same time, that's why I think that it'll be apt for us, Chap, to take a look at some cornerbacks as we get into the offseason and free agency and the draft coming up this year.
And again, it's apparently a deep draft for corners. I've seen a couple mock drafts that had the Colts taking a corner at 15. And I think I would prefer to have them bring in a veteran guy. And I'm not saying a guy that's 33, but a guy that's 28, 29, as opposed to going at 15 and you're adding him to Brents and Jones, which you're already young there. And what did they come out of the season, their assessment of Juju Brents? He missed so much time. He basically played without practicing. He really did. He missed all the prep work. And Jalen Jones, what was he, a 7th-round pick?
Yep.
He probably played like a 7th-round pick. But do you think that he can be a 2 or is he a 3? And if you add another young corner, then your top 3 potentially corners are rookies or second-year guys. And then Darrell Baker and Dallas Flowers are great stories. But, again, we talked about this going into the season. They were banking on these guys just on blind faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they've got to add a top outside guy. I would prefer it be a Stephon Gilmore type guy, which I don't know if they're going to pay. What would it take? $15 million? I don't know.
I was going to say between 12 and 14 probably for if you get just
so I would rather that as opposed to adding. I sort of feel like this with at receiver. You've got Alec Pierce, you got Josh Downs. If you've already got Brents and you got Jones, you want to add another young guy to develop. Although if you take a guy at 15, you believe he's not going to need a ton of development.
Start. Yeah.
Right. So it'll be interesting. And we haven't mentioned Kenny Moore,
who is going to be a free agent.
Yeah,
going to be
I
a free
forgot
agent.
to note he is a free agent.
So in my list of free agents, he's probably 3rd, 4th maybe of most important behind Pittman and Grover, Kenny Moore, and Minshew. I don't know, but yeah, they've got they took a calculated risk of going young at corner last year. They did. I mean, when with all the injuries and let's not forget they lose Isaiah Rodgers in June, whenever that was, and we always wonder, well, why didn't you bring in a veteran guy? Well, no, they were going to go young,
right? And
we saw the results. How many times were guys looking around?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought you had him. No, I thought you had him. Well, that's what you get. I mean, as much as you drill it. And at one point, remember when I can't remember who the player was. It was Tony Brown. When we asked Gus, why did you guys start Tony Brown? Well, we sort of knew what the other guys could do. We wanted to see what Tony can do. Well, that's no way to decide who your starting corner is.
Right.
But that's where they were. But they decided to go that route. They paid the price by a large extent. I would really like to know how they feel internally about the 2 draft picks from last year.
Mm-hmm.
And are they – hey, they're 2 of our guys, 2 of our top 4 guys at worst. That'll determine what they do in the draft.
Yeah, I feel like they really like Jalen Jones mostly because he was durable, and I know that that was a big issue with the unit this past year. but also he kind of fell off a little bit there toward the end of the season.
I think he wore down.
Down. I mean, rookie wall's a real thing for a lot of these guys sometimes. And the Brents, like you said, just it's hard to say because we saw some when he came in. You'd see him; he usually would make a splash play, but then it's back on the sidelines and out for 3 games. So it's hard to say.
I like how physical he is. I really do.
I do too.
He grew up here in Indianapolis, idolizing Bob Sanders. Like if you're a Colts fan, you want that guy on your team. You love to have him in your secondary, but he also needs to be healthy, of course. Like you. If you have a repeat of Bob again, you'd love that, but you want the guy to play. You need him to be in there.
Got to be in the lineup, otherwise it doesn't do you much good.
Exactly, he needs to be on the field. So in some aspects, I think that last year was that year where they didn't go out and get the veteran, and they saw what they had. Now they see what they've had. And it's probably wise to get a veteran on the outside there. I think Kenny Moore will certainly be interesting because very similar to Michael Pittman. If he's not there, then who? Because the slot corner is a different position than outside corner. It is entirely different. You cannot just say, oh, they're cornerbacks. They go through the same drills pregame. But what they are asked to do in the middle of the game is not the same. So do the Colts think that one of those guys, whether it's Dallas Flowers, Jalen Jones, Juju Brents, is a long-term nickel cornerback and they can let Kenny Moore go? I don't know. That would be interesting to ask that question to them as well.
We may find out by their actions.
Exactly. And, if they don't re-sign Kenny, exactly.
And Kenny's coming off a really, really good year.
Yep. He figured it out this year after a really lost year last year.
He figured it out or they figured out how better they came together because – 2 years ago, they weren't in unison on how they were going to do things. But and we'll know in the next couple of weeks what they feel. They're going to all these free agents they got. They're going to get these guys the ones they want. Mm-hmm. They'll get something done as opposed to letting a guy go to the open market and say, give us a chance to match.
And now safeties. We talk cornerbacks, safeties. I mean, it's a whole other thing, and it's in some aspects very similar with some young guys like Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas, who have been in there as starters and have had some playing time, and then Julian Blackmon as your free agent, who's the guy who certainly has the most experience among that group.
Achilles, what was it?
No, I don't think it was an Achilles because he had Achilles before.
Maybe it was a knee then.
But
it's end of the season,
right?
And
he was having a very good year.
Oh, he was having a great year.
He was having the best year of his career here, and he had a great time to have the best year of his career in a contract year in the 4th year of his rookie deal. So he's probably going to get paid somewhere by someone, whether it's a 1-year deal. If this injury was all that significant, I don't think it was as significant as an Achilles, though. I think it was just something.
I think you're right. Achilles, they've had so many Achilles, they just sort of jumped into somebody default mode.
Yeah, it just knocked him out for the last couple games of the season, whatever it was.
And shoulder injury. I guess I had forgotten that.
Okay. Yeah. So Blackmon ended up on injured reserve with that shoulder injury. That sounds far better to have than a lower body injury for a safety. So I figure that he'll get a deal somewhere.
He's one of my top 4 guys to re-sign. He was another one. Need to re-sign him.
So the Colts need to figure out what they're doing at safety. Like who are they going to be their 2 guys? Because Chris Ballard traded up to draft Nick Cross a couple years ago, which he does not often do. But Nick Cross was just 21 years old, I believe, or even 20 when they drafted him. I think he was 21.
I thought he was 21 last year.
Okay, maybe he was only 20 when they drafted him.
I thought he turned 21 after he got drafted.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. Like he was, and Chris said even after that year, well, maybe it was unfair to put the expectations on him that we did. So is now Nick Cross's opportunity? Is he asked to? Do you throw him in there alongside Julian Blackmon and say those are your 2 guys? Because it seemed like they really pivoted away from Rodney Thomas, Chap, at the end of the year. He got the starts as his rookie year.
He played his way.
He was a great story as a 7th round pick out of Yale. He did. He played. He was the best player that they had. He beat out Nick Cross for that spot. But it seemed like in the second half of 2023, they seemed to go away from Rodney Thomas.
Right. And again, when you look at positions of need, in my mind, it's receiver, it's corner, it's probably safety and tight end. So, and again, they've got 7 picks, unless they start doing what Chris Ballard always does.
Always does.
And they'll come out of the draft with 10 picks. So they've got a lot of areas, not crying needs, really. I mean, they're important needs, but not like, boy, if we don't come up with a left tackle, what do we got?
Right.
But so and again, they've got $67 million in cap space to do things.
Other safeties on the roster include Henry Black, Kendall Brooks, Marcel Dabo, Trevor Denbo, who's a special teams guy, Daniel Scott, who was on injured reserve, a draft pick, a 5th round pick, I believe, maybe 6th round pick. Out of, I forget who he played for.
Was he out of Cal?
Yeah, you're right, out of Cal. Who they drafted anticipating he would be another special teams guy as well. And Michael Tutsi, all safeties there, all other guys that you don't anticipate to be in your starting consideration. So
I think Dabo, isn't he one of the international
he was,
players?
Yes. I think you only get 1 year with him.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
This year he was just on the practice squad because that was 2 years ago that he was your international exception. So you could kind of develop him there. And this year they kept him on the practice squad. So some very interesting choices, I think, in the secondary about what's going to happen this offseason. Prime consideration, I think, for bringing in a veteran in one or both of those areas, cornerback or safety. Maybe if there's one area, I would say, hey, it's going to be a veteran you bring in, whether you look at everywhere, like wide receiver, even quarterback. I could see Chris Ballard saying, we've seen Sam Ellinger in the past. He's our number 2. I don't think they go that way again. But to bring in someone or to bring back Gardner Minshew, to actually go outside of the guys you have in your building now in free agency, I think secondary is probably the prime target out of every position, if that makes sense to you guys.
It's great to have young talent, but you can have too much young talent. So adding more, through the draft, yes, of course. But there are some spots you just need a veteran guy.
And Kenny Moore is a veteran guy, but he's kind of on an island.
We're talking outside guys.
Right, exactly. He's kind of on an island in what he does in that
I just think they
secondary.
re-signed Kenny. I just think...
Right. Chris Ballard loves Kenny Moore.
Well, and for a lot of these guys, their value is more with the Colts than it is elsewhere. Now, Grover Stewart, I think he's got...
value elsewhere.
He's got value everywhere.
Yeah.
And so does Pittman, although it'll be a year or two before he'll ever find that out. But Kenny Moore might be a guy.
It better be.
He might be a guy that's got more value here, and fans should not expect players to give hometown discounts, and players should not give hometown discounts.
Right. The only thing I can imagine with Kenny is if the Bears come after him and he goes to play with Eberflus. But at the same time, Eberflus isn't exactly on steady footing out there in Chicago. So does he go there like betting on his job there being consistent in Chicago? That's a tough choice, I think, if that becomes a choice for him. But you're right, he definitely has his role here, and he knows it. And Chris Ballard loves him. It took him a while to fall in love with him, having to be basically beaten down to sign him.
Okay, sign the kid.
Fine, I'll sign the guy out of Valdosta State. Out off the Patriots practice squad, or off of their cuts rather, to their roster so many years ago. But anyway, plenty to come over the next couple weeks. February 20th, so Tuesday of next week, is the first day clubs can designate franchise tag or transition tags for players. Sometime over those next 14 days, you would imagine either Michael Pittman Jr. signed an extension with the Colts, or he is tagged with the franchise tag.
Normally the tag comes and then the extension comes.
Right, yes,
because you want to make sure to lock your guy down.
And one thing I had sort of forgotten because I'm forgetful, but even in franchising him, he can still go out and get an offer. He can as long as it's not the exclusive franchise tag, the guy can go out and get an offer and come back. And if the Colts would match, you get 2 first-round draft picks, which no team's going to do.
Right. You're not going to trade 2 first-round draft picks for Michael Pittman Jr. He's a pretty good player. He's not franchise altering in that way to trade 2 first-round picks. February 29th to March 3rd, the NFL Scouting Combine will be back in Indianapolis. March 11th is the first day that unrestricted free agency negotiations can begin. Then on March 13th, 4 p.m., the big time, the new year starts. Teams can sign those unrestricted free agents. April 15th, Colts OTAs could begin at that date. Draft is set for April 25th in Detroit through the 27th. Colts are locked into the 15th overall pick for now until they trade it
down
for 27 other picks.
2 second-round picks and a third-round pick. That's and end up with 14.
At least we're not the NBA where you trade and they're trading 2029 second-round draft picks.
And they still come out and they wear the hat of the team that drafted them.
Weird.
The Pacers did not draft Jarris Walker, and they got some other guy. I don't even remember what his name is, and he still comes out. Yeah, exactly. May 2nd is the deadline to exercise the fifth-year option on first-round picks, and that for the Colts would be Quiddy Pay, where the Colts decide to extend him.
What's that date, May 2nd?
May 2nd, yes, is that day. So that's kind of in the future a little bit. But I'm sure that they've probably had some discussions about that already, and they have a good idea, I'd imagine, Chris Ballard, about what he wants to do.
The fifth-year option for these guys
is
like
expensive for defensive ends.
$14 million.
Yeah. Really? I thought it was higher than that.
I didn't know it went by position. I thought it went by where you were drafted. I need to get boned up on that before the time comes.
I thought it was. We'll look into that and get into that next week because we talked about
that in a future podcast.
Yeah, exactly, the Colts Blue Zone podcast in the future. Yes, we'll certainly do that. So we have plenty more positions to get to for the Colts in the future: defensive line, linebackers, special teams, which probably won't be too dramatic of a discussion, but there might be some things to tweak at here and there.
Rigo.
Exactly. That's probably the big one there. But that's in the future. For now, for Matt and Chap, I'm Dave. We appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone Podcast.